sometimes there's this confusion within spiritual teachings about states of consciousness. People sometimes say that awakening is not a state of consciousness, enlightenment is not a state of consciousness, that there are states of consciousness and there's something else called enlightenment. No. There's only states of consciousness. Consciousness takes different states. That's what consciousness does. That's what consciousness is. It's a substance that has no substance, which can take any state. It can take the state of a refrigerator, of a car, of a cat, of a human, of a dog, of an alien, of anything. Okay. Some of these states of consciousness are very, very intelligent and conscious and mystical. Others are not. Others are as dumb, literally, as a doorknob or a coffee table. Of course, in the absolute sense, no state of consciousness is better than any other state. It's not better to be a human than it is to be a dog or than it is to be a coffee table. It's just different. They're different. They have different pros and cons, different capacities. In a sense, it's great to be a human because you can experience an orgasm. A coffee table can't experience an orgasm. But on the other hand, you can experience a lot of suffering as a human that the coffee table is safe from. So maybe it's not so bad to be a coffee table. You lose some things, but you also gain some things. That's the nature of all form. Every state has its pros and cons to it. There is nothing but states of consciousness. There's an infinite number, of course, of different states of consciousness. There are thousands and even millions of different awakened states of consciousness. There is not a singular awake or enlightened state of consciousness. There are millions of them. There are different degrees of them. This is one of the biggest misconceptions that I see and self-deceptions that I see within spiritual circles and spiritual teachings, is that they frame awakening or enlightenment as a singular state that is achieved, or even they get tricky and they say, oh, it's not even a state. Some traditions call it Turiya, for example. It's supposed to be the stateless state, the fourth state. You know, they have sleeping, dreaming, waking, and then they have Turiya, the fourth state, the non-state state. But that's still a state. If you have a state where consciousness is completely empty of form, that's still a state. That's the state of emptiness. You can be in a state of total emptiness. You can be in a state of the state you're in right now. You can be in some psychedelic state. There are millions of different psychedelic states. You can be in a meditative state. There are millions of meditative states. They're all different. They all have their own pros and cons and benefits and negatives. And you can explore all these different states. And you can also realize the nature of all the states without necessarily having to explore them all. See, I haven't explored all states, but I have become conscious of the nature of consciousness and how it takes on these different states. And your life consists of these different states. But for our purposes, there are certain states that are more resourceful for doing this work that we do than other states. For example, if you're drunk, you're in a certain state, but that's not a very good state for self-actualization work. It might be a great state, though, when you're in a nightclub and you want to dance, or you want to hit on some girls and you're feeling shy and anxious. Having a couple of drinks of whiskey or whatever might be perfect for that situation. On the other hand, you can also take it too far, drink too many whiskeys, and then you're going to have a terrible state, and then you're going to regret it the next day. And that's going to be a problem. So you have to be careful with these states. Which kind of states are you putting yourself in? When you're watching television for 5 hours, that puts you in a certain state. When you're watching one of my videos, that changes your state of consciousness just a little bit. When you take 5-MeO-DMT, that changes your consciousness like a motherfucker. And then how much DMT you take changes your state even further. You can take a little DMT, a medium dose, a giant dose, a whiteout dose. You can take a dose of DMT so so great, you'll become so conscious that you'll literally become that infinite pure white singularity of everything possible. You'll think you're dead. You might even die, conventionally speaking. But really, you'll just become infinite. You'll become that singularity. So in a certain sense, it doesn't matter what state you're in, but in another sense, it matters very much. From a practical perspective, it matters very much what state you're in, because the state you're in determines what you're able to do in life. For example, if your brain, the so-called imaginary brain, of course, the brain is imaginary, but if your brain is filled with toxins, heavy metals and other chemicals, and your body, because you're eating terrible food, is filled with toxins as well, this is going to actually shift down the state of your consciousness such that you're not going to be able to think straight, you won't be able to concentrate or focus, you'll have ADD symptoms, you'll be autistic or whatever, and you're not going to be able to do this work. You're not going to be able to sit and just meditate because your mind is going to be all over the place. You might even have suicidal thoughts. You might even have homicidal thoughts. You might be in a state of insanity. That does exist. States of madness, those exist. So be very careful what you put into your body and how you program your mind, because that does affect your state. The kinds of videos you choose to watch on YouTube affects your state. The kind of websites you visit affects your state. The kind of porn you watch affects your state. The kind of chemicals you put into your body affect your state. Don't let a spiritual teacher that tell you that state is not important. State is crucial. Your baseline state, in a sense, dictates everything in your life. What you're doing is stemming from your state. If you're having difficulty awakening, it's because your state is wrong. You're stuck in a lower state. Many spiritual teachers won't tell you this. They like to pretend as though like, oh, state is irrelevant. You can just ignore state. No, you can't ignore state. State is super relevant, which is why psychedelics are so powerful and important, because they can show you these higher states that otherwise would be very difficult to achieve. And what a lot of many meditation teachers don't take into account is that today, especially now in the last couple of decades, in a sense, awakening is harder than ever because of the state that society is inducing in people. All the social media, all the junk food, all the video games, all the porn, all the virtual reality, all of the cell phones and smartphones, all of the conspiracy theories that are going around these days, all of this is changing people's states, and it's putting people in very rigid states such that they can't even sit and focus for 5 minutes because their minds are so scatterbrained with ADD symptoms and autism and all this sorts of junk. And so when some Zen master tells you, oh, just sit there and meditate and you'll awaken. No, you won't, because of the state you're in. Your mind and your brain is filled with such bad ideas, worldviews, theories, and also toxic chemicals that some of you have zero chance of awakening, even if you sit there for 30 years. Now, of course, don't freak out. Don't let that be a limiting belief. I'm just telling you, be careful what you put into your mind, what you put into your body. You need to actually, if you really want to awaken deeply and reach some of these higher realms of consciousness, you need to really start to clean up your diet, clean up your information intake, various detox protocols that I will share with you in the future. This will all be super important. And yeah, I'm just putting that out there because it's easy to get tricked into thinking that state is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. State is very relevant. And awakening is a state. The reason that you have difficulty awakening, or really you can't even awaken from hearing some teacher talking to you, and you've probably heard Eckhart Tolle or Rupert Spira or Sadhguru or whoever is your favorite, non-dual teacher. You've heard them droning on and on and on about consciousness and awakening and enlightenment and no self and God and love and all this. But to you, it's just words falling on deaf ears. No matter how much you try, nothing changes for you. You don't awaken. Why is that? Because you're in the wrong state. And they're not telling you that. That's the truth. But that's also good because that means you can change your state. You can put yourself into more resourceful states that will help you get closer to awakening.